lean into people. Don't expect from them. Don't think that they're lucky to even have a job. Lean into their humanity and kindness and that team family thing. Really, I'm glad you asked that question because it was a challenging one for me. And I really am happy with the answer right now. Family is different than business, but the best teams are those things. And so lean into the humanity of this time.
Welcome to All Hands by Lattice, where we believe that people strategy is business strategy. I'm your host, Katelin Holloway. For the last decade, I've been a people and culture executive at some of the internet's most beloved startups. But my fascination with building true people-first cultures started many, many years ago. From film to tech, and a few interesting layovers in between, the one common denominator remains. I am most passionate about enabling people through belonging to create beautiful, innovative products. On All Hands, I talk with CEOs and other C-level leaders about how being a people-first company is a strategic advantage. Join us while we chat with these top leaders about how a people-first approach isn't just good for people, it's good for business too. Today, I have the absolute privilege of chatting with the chairman of VaynerX, CEO of VaynerMedia, and 5-time New York Times bestselling author, Gary Vaynerchuk. That's right, folks. We have Gary V here today to serve up some tips from his experience in leading phenomenal people-first companies. Now, I've been a longtime consumer of Gary's gospel, following his Spitfire advice on building businesses and negotiating personal success. But he's mostly known for his authentic ability to meaningfully motivate anyone that happens into his orbit. I met Gary a while back, and I was struck by one thing. He was actually the real deal. He was a great storyteller, yes, and a lot of people confuse that with shtick. But he was so real, so relatable, and honestly, too raw to be fake. Since then, I've paid very close attention to how he leads, how he chooses to build his businesses, and who he chooses to keep close. Not because I'm a full-on creep, maybe just a little bit, but because I was genuinely curious about how he deployed his gift and how it manifested itself within his organizations. So today, after many years of waiting, I finally get to have this conversation with Gary. Welcome to All Hands, Gary.
Thank you so much, Katelin. Really, that was very sweet. Thank you.
Of course. So now my assumption here is that some of our listeners probably have already heard the famous Gary V rise to success story, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you to please share a bit about your journey to here.
So I'll go real fast. I was born in the Soviet Union. I came to America when I was 3. Studio apartment in Queens, multiple family, 6, 7, 8 family members, depending on the timing. Really late 70s, the economy had collapsed in the US. So it was a tough economy. My parents didn't speak English. It was really, really rough. And the first several years were super rough. And my parents worked super hard, side jobs. My mom was home with me. My sister was born right after. So it was really, really intense. And then my dad got a job as a stock boy in a liquor store and worked his way up. And, very much one of my great heroes, my dad, to make it in America. And he eventually became the manager of that store. And that allowed us to move to Edison, New Jersey. He eventually became the part owner of that store. And I really had kind of a middle-class upbringing, though it's funny, I made this joke with my dad the other day. We really lived lower middle class to almost borderline. We just didn't spend any money on anything. It was super hardcore immigrant style, spend money on nothing except shelter and food, no vacations as a kid, no stuff. And that led to me wanting stuff and doing it my own way. And lemonade stands, shoveling snow, washing cars. I really had that gift. And it was a necessity too, if I wanted to keep up with the Joneses with Nintendo and action figures. And
right.
That's what I did. And, kind of grinded, and then eventually became really good at baseball cards, made a lot of money on the weekends in the malls in New Jersey. And then eventually my dad had his own store in Springfield, New Jersey. He brought me into that as a kid of the family business. And I kind of learned the liquor business, retail, customer behavior. I kind of took it over operationally in my late teens, early 20s, went to college, but was a really bad student and would come home every weekend and work in the store. And launched WineLibrary.com, one of the first e-commerce wine businesses in America, and took my dad's business from a $4 to a $60 million business in an 8-year period and kind of made it. And then YouTube came out and I just started making wine videos, and it just clicked the way I communicated, my expertise in that subject matter. And then I started using Twitter to promote it. Then YouTube sells to Google for $1.7 billion. I go crazy and I'm like, oh my God, wait a minute, maybe I have a bigger knack than just selling wine. Maybe I really do know what people are doing. It was a real epiphany for me. And then I started investing and invested in Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr first. So I came out super hot. Then I wrote a book about social media in 2009 that kind of put me on the map called Crush It. Then I started giving keynotes, and that really put me on another map because I was good at it. And then my brother graduated from college, the economy collapsed. We decided to start VaynerMedia. I wanted to start a communications kind of infrastructure because at that point, in those last 3 years, I realized I was really good at marketing and communicating. And that's kind of where I'm at. Wrote 5 New York Times bestsellers and a lot of other stuff.
You have so much. I feel like you probably even left some off the list.
Definitely Vayner Sports. I'm wearing the hat right now. My brother and I started a sports agency. I'm a creative at heart. And so I'm a creative business operator. And so I need a lot of side things.
And on top of all of that, you are family first. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very private with my family life, as anybody who follows me knows. But I spend, my weekends, I'm checked out, 7 weeks vacation a year, recitals and sporting events. I love my family, but no question, I'm wildly passionate about my career. As much content as I put out, that's all post-produced from an hour keynote or a podcast interview like this. I'm spending quite a bit of time on my personal life that it's just not a comfortable place for me to share, like it is for most people in the world.
Right. The only reason I ask is because there's more to you than just your business, trying to balance and manage everything that you have going on. In addition to that, you also have these other parts of yourself. And when we talk about, bringing your whole self to work and blah, 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 you've got a lot on the docket.
And I'm on the board of Pencils of Promise and Charity Water. I'm one of the major players in this All-In Challenge that's caught a lot of attention right now.
Right.
We raised $33 million in 3 weeks in the US for COVID. The more altruistic kind things I do, I tend to not promote as much. Family, I don't promote as much. I don't share as much. But yeah, I think we all bring our full selves. I think the reason there's a lot of humanity in the way I operate our business has a lot to do with those other aspects of my life.
Right. Okay. So let's focus this conversation then, just for the sake of simplicity, on VaynerMedia. So talk to me a little bit about just the mechanics. So I know what you do externally with that product, with that business, but how many employees do you have in VaynerMedia?
In VaynerMedia, I think we have 650, 700. In VaynerX, which is all the companies, I think it's 1,000.
Wow. And where are your offices located? I know you have several offices, right?
VaynerMedia is in London, Singapore, LA, and New York.
I had the pleasure of seeing you speak at LinkedIn Talent Connect last year on the main stage. And you shared something that has stuck with me. And it was the first piece of business advice your father ever gave you. Do you remember what that was?
That?
No. No, but I like it.
Oh, I was very transparent. Yes, I do. My favorite thing that my dad ever taught me was spitting in his hand. That's what I just did. And your word is your bond. And that really, really helped me, with my reputation. I'm glad he did that. Yeah, the first piece of advice was a little bit unfortunate. My dad grew up in the Soviet Union, and he said to me, as we're literally pulling up to liquor stores, like, keep an eye on the employees. The employees are your enemy. They may steal. And that really was super foreign to me because my natural state and what I've executed my whole career has completely been the opposite. But it stuck with me, and it was disappointing, jarring, concerning, but he meant it. And I judged my father for a long time around it, but now I understand it because he came from a culture that was communism where everyone stole. But right. It jarred me. And I rarely share it because I don't love painting that light on my dad, but that was it.
Well, the reason it stuck with me as someone who was sitting in the audience listening to you was because the way you framed it in that conversation was really about how that has inspired you to lead with empathy and compassion, and how you and your father, evolved that conversation over time, and the way you and your addition to the company, the family business, really helped change and shape that over time. 100%. I think that's the grit component. My dad made a video on Instagram the other day, and he was talking about how much he loves the staff, and it was super, still to this day, it feels a little foreign. But, I'm so proud of him because the sign of a real man, a real woman, in my opinion, is the ability to change your mind or admit that you were wrong. And so I still laugh because I'm still a little cynical. I'm like, Dad, but it's one of the great legacies for me in that business for sure. Changing the relationship between my father and his employees has been very rewarding for me. I really appreciated Gary sharing that story because I could feel how raw that was for him still. This idea of reflecting and learning as you go, changing your opinions when you realize you're wrong, is a huge step in being a great people-first leader. I have a confession to make. I am completely and entirely in love with your business partner, your chief heart officer, Miss Claude Silver. She and I have been on a few screens and stages together. And in fact, once just a few weeks ago, she's someone I've admired for a very, very long time because she dares to lead heart first. So talk to me a little bit about your relationship with Claude. How did it start? When did you know it was her? I think that your journey together is equally as fascinating.
I met Claude through a mutual friend, Gail Tippard, who was a big executive at Unilever and now is the chief brand officer at Weight Watchers. She's like, just got to meet my friend. I was looking for more senior account people. We met in Neil's Coffee on the Upper East Side. And within 18 seconds, I knew.
Yeah.
I just knew she's the employee that most reminds me of my mother that I've ever interacted with. And I hired her on the spot, and she was expensive for us and senior. And she came in and she brought great energy, and she was very good at her account job. And then we started having conversations about a year in of her doing HR, which was super left field, but she became the person I most, to this day, she's the person I most trust to handle anything that I feel like I need to handle. And that is, as you can imagine, when you value the human and you value the employee relationship graph, it's very, very, very powerful. And so here's where the story takes a wild turn. So we're kind of planning, and then Claude walks in one day and is like, I quit. And I was like, what? I was crushed. Oh, that I just completely was caught off guard. Back to her own ability to, emotional intelligence and that. And so it was really, really powerful and really tough. And literally before she finished the sentence, I started the process of winning her back.
Yeah.
She left and we stayed in touch. And somewhere about a year later, I convinced her to come back to sit on top of all of HR with this title that we came up with called Chief Heart Officer. And she's my true partner. She's more of my partner than my CFO is. Mm-hmm. And my CFO and I have a great relationship, especially now because we've gone through some tough times with COVID.
Yeah.
But she's my true partner. Like, that's where the decisions are being made at her and I level. And everything goes through our filter at the end of the day. And it's been a very fruitful, tremendous relationship here. And it's growing and the bonding is getting even stronger.
And Gary, that's actually the reason you're on this show. A lot of our listeners are people, practitioners, they're operators within organizations. And hopefully another cohort that we have listening in are CEOs looking to lead more like leaders like you that they admire, who are really leading people first. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you actually partner with Claude? What does it look like when it's great? How do you know when things are hurting? Talk to me about your dynamic and what the daily looks like with you two.
So we talk through osmosis. Sometimes it's even a look, it's a random text. We check in, but for the most part, Claude knows that what I want is for her to have a pulse on every employee. How is Rick doing? What is Sally up to? Who's a bad behavior? Who's not? And it ebbs and flows. Sometimes we can talk a lot over 2 weeks. Sometimes we can go 2 weeks without talking. But her role in the HR department is just fundamentally different. It is literally counselor, it is literally friend, it is literally, investigator. She knows that I want to know who's not a nice person. It's really true. It's as simple as that. I want to know who's not, and I want to get them out. And obviously we want to console and over communicate and be candorous, but to me, people that aren't nice are just completely unacceptable within our four walls, no matter what kind of producer they are. No matter how much they're bringing in value, it's just the truth of the situation. So, that's kind of how I see it. And so our interactions are text, FaceTimes, calls, meetings. And when she's got real stuff, she'll come. And whether it's one real thing or 6 kind of real things, that's when she'll ask for meetings and she goes to the top of the calendar and away we go.
Right. And I've heard you say before in a tie between your business partners, if it's the CFO or, insert any other C-level person here and Claude's always going to take the tie.
Yes. If CFO wants to move on somebody because of financial purpose, and listen, we've gone through some layoffs here. Like, there's nothing else there's no way to sugarcoat it. And what's tough about being people first is there's a level of guilt when you actually do things like having to save the business because we have liquidation issues and you have to let someone go. That's like the worst. But, that's where we've had it here. Even during a pandemic, a liquidation financial event where the CFO has absolutely emerged to have more clout because we need him to lean in. There's been times in the last week where Claude's say overruled what was a desperately needed financial ruling.
Right.
Whether that's diversity and inclusion offsets, right? Like we're just conscious of that. We want it to be as good as it can be. And that gets tough, right? Because you want to make sure you're not saving people just because they're not a white male. And so you're having these really complex, very deep conversations and it all matters. And look, I'm an independent company and the buck stops with me. And if I want great balance of people, then that's what's going to happen. And don't forget, these are all subjective calls. What's not subjective is how many men and women and minorities, and what is subjective is Rick better than Sally or vice versa. And so, these are challenges for all of us in a modern world. I have a funny feeling that a lot of companies are going to get out of whack with their diversity and inclusion numbers now because they're just doing whatever they can to stay alive. And I actually am empathetic to that. On the flip side, for me, it matters even when this ship it's not sinking. So to me, the ship is rocky. So let's not act like it's sinking and let's hold up our morals and our morals. I bring that up because of the audience that's listening. I'm concerned that people are going to look the other way of some of their thoughtful and proper thinking that's been built in the last couple of years because the P&L is looking ugly.
Gary said exactly what I was thinking here. Values are values, no matter what. If your company is dedicated to supporting diverse voices, that doesn't just end because it's not convenient. I've listened to enough of your content, and so I feel comfortable saying I think that we both know that your true culture really reveals itself when things go south. And so I'm very curious, how has your real culture revealed itself over the last month?
Besides the fact that we were forced into some layoffs because of our financial liquidation situation, just the reality of the situation, like every other part has been phenomenal. I'm not a traditional big fan of work from home because I did grow up in an old school immigrant business where that means employees are slacking off at home. I'm happy to admit that and I'm comfortable with that. I also, that's that's a little unauthentic. That's 20% of it. 80% of it is I love people around each other. I love the osmosis. I love that stuff. But because that's being able to be fulfilled through Zoom, and Google Hangouts and all other platforms, it's been great. I'm very happy with it. Outside of the fact that some of the, exits have been staggered, which keeps people a little bit uneasy. Mm-hmm. It's a lot more fun to be able to say, hey, we had to do this. And everyone else is, we just haven't been able to do that because, we're not under stable ground. Things are changing by the second. But the culture's been great. People have been great with each other. I love who we've been through this. And I feel confident about it.
I can tell you only because Claude and I were on a thing the other day together, and it was before your layoffs, but I could feel it in her. I could feel the heart and the heaviness that she had with it. And in answering some of the questions for that particular audience, the way she talked about your partnership and the conversations you were having, I really hoped for you all that some of that showed through in the way you communicated with your team, and the positivity that you have for what it's going to look like moving forward, I think is really powerful.
It's a real thing. It's a challenging real thing. But I do think that even the people that are most upset or even bitter, there is at least some layer of realization that this is a very generational situation.
Totally. This is something we haven't seen before. And I think we're all going to come out on the backside of this as changed people. There's no doubt about that. The way we operate, the way we show up, and to be frank, what we expect of our employers, I think will shift and change. What are some things that you have experienced during the lockdown period that you're excited to bring back with you to work when things get back to quote unquote normal?
I'm probably going to stay and work from home on Fridays or at least once a week and have my most meaningful meetings then.
Yeah.
That's just game changing. That's a culture shift and a half. I'll probably take 5 to 15 to 25 less flights a year for meetings that I don't need to go for the day. That's game changing. I'm not going to be anxious to wrap up a meeting and head into New York City traffic to make one of my kids' recitals or sporting events when now I can leave 2 hours earlier and do my Zooms from Starbucks or the house or the gym that they're going to play at. I think I'm going to meet a lot more people because the things that I thought I needed to do in person, the touchy-feely, the nuances, the way their eye moved, all those little things, I feel like I'm mastering, AKA feeling very comfortable doing over FaceTimes and Zooms. So that's great. So there's a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. Claude was telling me something about how she is hosting open office hours or times where folks can jump in.
12/12s.
Yes.
So Claude calls me. She's like, I'm like, Claude, why don't you do 12-minute FaceTimes with 12 random Vayner employees? It's just a context point. It'll be fantastic. And it's crushing.
Nice.
Just a hello. Everybody goes around and says hi, one thing, and makes them feel closer to Claude, which is what I'm looking to scale, and away we go.
Does VaynerMedia have stated values?
You're going to love this. I'm not sure. I think the team has done some stuff. The stated value for me is like kindness over everything. I think we're a little more osmosis. I'm a little bit less, let's make a bill of rights, but I'm not against it. I actually think most people learn well from that. That's something that I think I've quote unquote dropped the ball on. I think we could put clarity to it. We do have an incredible onboarding first week. Nice. I have a lot of employees that come to me like, wow, I really understand what I'm here for. So that's kind of cool. I'm excited about that. I don't know if that comes in the manifestation of a post or a handbook, but I think we do articulate it in the interview process and definitely in the onboarding first week.
For what it's worth, I've seen the values thing come to life in many different ways. I worked at Pixar Animation Studios for a long time, and we never had stated values. But I knew why I showed up every day. The mission and the vision were super clear. So
I tend to go that way because I don't like how people interpret like things that are put on paper. I'd rather it be a feeling than letting the excuses of an adjective misplay it.
Right. And you can wordsmith them to death.
That's why I like kindness over everything. Tough to manipulate that.
Right.
Kindness is hard to, though you can manipulate that. Somebody could say, look, I'm tough because that's kind. I'm being candorous. So you could play anything.
It's so true. But I think, luckily for you, it's hard for people to not know what you stand for. You have so many different platforms in which you just are so authentic in the way you deliver, and you've been consistent with time. I think, I'm someone who's followed your content for a long time. You have been consistent. I think that the fads of the technology and the things that we're faced with, COVID being it doesn't sit outside of that realm, but I think that you are great at looking forward and being futuristic in your thinking. Your core values, your human values, the way you hold most dear, you've always been consistent with. So
thank you.
I just was curious how it showed up because every company is different and we all operate with different frameworks.
You know how it really shows up? Almost every meeting I have, as they sit down in my office, they're like, man, this place, you can just smell it in the air.
So I work at Initialized Capital now, and I'm getting to know our portfolio. And so as I walk into these different founder meetings, which are all virtual, so great time to start a new job, it's hard for me to understand that feeling without being there physically.
Yeah, I get it. I get that.
Do you feel like you're losing that, or is it because it's your own company?
For sure. Yeah, with my own company, it's a little bit easier. And I also am not overly stressed about 8 weeks or 15 weeks. There's a little bit of that. But yeah, I definitely, there's plenty of things that real life is better than Zoom. You know what I mean? So, yes, I think that's right.
Yeah. Okay. So if you don't have stated values to kind of point to and help people stay on the rails or keep on track when you're thinking about managing performance, and my definition of performance is both your results and your behaviors that drive those results. How do you know when something is off? Outside of Claude, knocking on your door and being like, yo, we got a problem over here.
The other 80 people that do the same thing with me, I'm like, my ear is to the ground.
Yeah. I think I read once or saw you on stage once talking about how you intentionally invest time in following your employees on their social media channels. Do you still do that?
I do. And because all of this is subjective. When it comes to review time, when Karen's like, Sally's amazing, I'm like, sure, you're rock climbing with her every day. You and your boyfriends are best friends. But I need to have that because I'm the judge and the jury, and I need to have context. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, Brandon is my best friend. He's also the best executive I've ever worked with. That's why Wine Library is flourishing. But I like to have the context. I'll give you a real life example. There was one young woman that was getting forced out of a team, the worst feedback. And I knew, because I did some real homework, watching it unfold and then double dipped in once it became an issue, that young woman properly had a problem with one other young woman But that young woman, the second one, had been on the team for a long time and was best friends with everybody. And so they all subconsciously, half of them, consciously the other half of them, rallied against this young woman who was 100% right. And our company would have fired her.
So what did you do?
I didn't fire her. I switched her out and I scolded everybody else for some bullshit.
Yeah. I think that's a really hard thing that CEOs don't invest the time in.
HR departments don't invest in time into what I just said. Nobody's investing time into that.
Now, this may seem a bit much, and I know it can take up a lot of time, but this is just one example of how important it is to be involved in the people aspect of your company. But you shouldn't do it alone. HR teams and managers should be leaning on each other, learning from one another, and not just in times of crisis. How about on the hiring front? So if we go further upstream, I know that you hate references. I do too. They're bullshit.
They are.
And I also think that the entire hiring process is busted 16 ways to Sunday.
It's why I completely guess on intuition and then deal with it after the fact. And I'm not even kidding. And I know that that's not scalable for others. I just can't make up how I do it. My company does it however they want. We've got people that I believe in, kind of going through the hiring process, but a lot of them I believe in, but they have totally different processes than me. And I think we're too slow at hiring. And I think we're too slow at firing. Too slow at firing is my fault. Too slow at hiring is my company's fault. And we've got, those are some of our vulnerabilities. and I would say that my company's greatest vulnerability is the lack of candor that goes into sometimes firing in its history. And we've gotten a lot better at it because I realized I wasn't good at it. I didn't like the confrontation. And so I would just do the Band-Aid move. And that led to a lot of hurt. And I regret it, but I'm not good at conflict. I've gotten much, much better, but I'm still probably a 5. It's a lot better than the 1 that I naturally was. And I hope to get better because I think as we've found our balance with candor leading to exit, it's definitely been better.
Do you feel like your partnership with Claude or moving somebody that once was in a marketing role into this people role, has that helped your ability to find or have those conversations a little bit more easily? Or is this a path that you've been riding on your own?
No, because Claude's also got the same flaw.
Interesting.
We're just sweet like that. And that sweetness, unfortunately, occasionally, 20% of the time manifests into not enough feedback, person's stunned, they're fired, and we're now bad people. And I used to get mad at my employees when I was a kid. I was like, how do you not know you stink? Like, and by the way, I kept you here a year longer than you should have been.
Right.
And you've stunk in other places and you're going to continue to but then I realized I need to be more accountable on this one. And so we've gotten better. We're still not all the way there, but we've definitely gotten better and we're going to continue to try to get better.
I mean, that's all we can do, right? Is identify those weaknesses and have that self-awareness. We always tell our managers, if it's a surprise to the person that you're letting go, that they're getting fired, then you've done something wrong, manager. And something that I found, I'm just curious to get your thoughts on this. This might be a little bit not well accepted in the people community, but I actually believe that the people that truly have those behavioral challenges, maybe it's not performance, as related to their job, but the behavioral performance side of the gig, they lack a deep sense of self-awareness or even a mild sense of self-awareness.
You're preaching.
Of course they're going to be surprised.
Are you kidding me? There's people we've given 30 pieces of feedback to that are stunned.
Right.
And again, I think that I do rely on intent.
Yeah.
What absolutely puts me at a place where I can put my head on my pillow is we've made many mistakes. I mean, the amount of mistakes I've made in the last 22 years operating businesses at the top has been extraordinary.
Yeah.
On the flip side, the intent was never bad. And I feel good about that. I never chose money over the human. I might have struggled in my early years and even to this day with the necessary candor to not make it, to make it as great as it can be in such a crappy situation. But I'm way further along and my intent is way beyond my contemporaries. I know that to be true.
I also think it's funny to have that boomerang conversation with folks later on in life. If you ever have that opportunity to be like, hey, I know I could have showed up in a different way.
And Katelin, I'll be honest with you, I've been pretty lucky. I've had it 80% of the time where people have come back and be like, wow, you know what? I took you for granted or I was entitled because it was your fault that I was entitled, Gary, because you made it so cozy, but
right.
I do appreciate you more. I'm also always open for business on any relationship that didn't go well.
Yeah.
I'm always ready for somebody, including people that have stolen from me, including people that I did a bad job because they had a great run, but I stunned them with my out of nowhere firing. I am absolutely willing to have that relationship at all times, because I always think yesterday is contextual, but not as important as today and tomorrow.
I completely agree. So I'm going to hit you with rapid fire questions. I want you to try to answer them as quickly as possible. Don't overthink it. Are you ready?
Yes.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No.
Zoom or phone call?
Zoom.
Giants or Jets?
Jets.
Okay. That was just the warm up.
By the way, for anybody who doesn't know, Jets over everything.
This is your North Star.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That was the warm up. These last ones won't be so easy. Company culture, family or sports team?
Great fucking question. Wow. Sports team with unbelievable amounts of family dynamics.
Oh, I like that answer. That's the best one I've gotten yet. I like that one.
Thank you.
Okay. What is your favorite interview question and why?
What is the greatest thing that could happen out of you taking this job?
Oh,
I like reverse engineering.
Yeah. I like that. Okay.
And then peppering them for 3 to 4 minutes in that to make them tell you the actual truth, not the answer they think you're looking for.
Right. It's the power of why you ask it 5 times or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay. Now the last one is actually my favorite interview question that I've asked every employer that I've ever taken a job
That's awesome.
with. And that is, when was the last time you wanted something so badly it hurt?
That's a really great question. I would say last year's National Sports Card Convention, I couldn't sleep for 2 weeks because I knew my son and I were going to go for an entire week, set up a table, and spend deep amounts of time together around a connection point we have with each other at this young of an age. And like literally, as I'm saying this to you right now, my heart is breaking because I'm pretty confident this year is going to be canceled the last week of July in Atlantic City, because I literally treat it as a Christmas event, because it is such a bonding thing for me and him.
Oh, I love that. Okay. Well, I would have taken the job with you. Good answer. Okay. This is it. I'm feeling so inspired by our conversation, as I knew I would. It is what you do best at the end of the day. So very, very last question to wrap it up here. What advice would you give to leaders and people leaders out there trying to make sense of this pandemic? How can they use this as an opportunity to build a better organization on the backside of everything?
Leaning into the humanity and your people is going to be the tactic that leads to the biggest financial success post this pandemic, 100,000%. Lean into people. Don't expect from them. Don't think that they're lucky to even have a job. Lean into their humanity and kindness and that team family thing. Really, I'm glad you asked that question because it was a challenging one for me. And I really am happy with the answer right now. Family is different than business, but the best teams are those things. And so lean into the humanity of this time.
I love it, Gary. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so grateful. And to you, the listener, thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of All Hands, brought to you by Lattice. I'm your host, Katelin Holloway. This episode was produced by Pod People, Rachel King, Eliza Lambert, and Samantha Gatzik. Special thanks to Annette Cardwell. Learn more about how Lattice can help your business stay people-focused at lattice.com or find us on Twitter at LatticeHQ. Don't forget to subscribe to All Hands wherever you get your podcasts. Join us next time.